All right, so today we're diving deep into Fourth Wing. It's this fantasy novel that's like everywhere online. Everyone's been talking about it, and for good reason. But I know you haven't really explored the whole Dungeons and Dragons kind of thing before, right? So we're going to break it all down for you. Think of us as like your guides to this whole war-torn world, all the dragon riders, and of course all the romance that makes this book such a wild ride.
Yeah, it really does feel like you're stepping right into a movie or something. Navarre, this world is constantly under attack. And these dragon riders, they're like elite warriors. They're the only hope for survival, basically.
I mean, imagine, dragons are real.
Yeah.
And bonding with one, it's not just some, cool thing. It's literally life or death in this world. And what makes Fourth Wing so different is our main character, Violet Sorrengail. She's this young woman, loves books, loves knowledge, but her mom, who's like this powerful general, forces her into this crazy world of warriors.
Yeah, and she's not exactly built for it. Violet has this condition, makes her physically weak, so everyone just thinks she's going to fail. But that's what makes it so interesting.
Yeah, so they throw her into this intense training, Bastiath War College. And just to get into the Riders Quadrant, I mean, she has to survive this insane obstacle course. It's called the Parapet. I'm talking like death-defying leaps, fire, the whole shebang. Seriously, it's brutal.
Totally. And even if you survive that, the first year is like this gauntlet of crazy challenges. There are these rivalries that could literally get you killed, plus the constant threat of attack. And then you've got this whole relationship web, too. So you've got Xaden Riorson. He's this brooding, super skilled dragon rider. But get this, his father was executed by Violet's mother. So yeah, there's some serious bad blood there.
Oh, wow. And then there's Dain Aetos. He's Violet's childhood friend. Super protective, almost too much, really. I mean, it's clear he cares about her, but is it just as a friend?
Yeah, right. That's the question. But through all of that, Violet's using her brains to make up for what she lacks physically. She's studying combat, poisons, strategy. I mean, she's really determined to prove everyone wrong.
And then comes the big moment, dragon bonding. In this world, dragons choose their riders. It's this mystical connection. And everyone thinks Violet's too weak to attract a dragon at all.
Yeah, but then Fourth Wing throws you a curveball. Violet doesn't just bond with one dragon, she bonds with two.
No way. 2 dragons. That's got to be unheard of.
And not just any dragons. One is Tarn, this massive black dragon, everyone's scared of him. And the other is Ondarna, this young golden dragon. So she's got the most feared dragon in the sky, and this dragon that represents hope and light. It's mind-blowing.
It is. And this dual bond, that's where things really get crazy. It gives Violet so much power, but it also makes her a huge target. Anyone who wants that power is going to come after her. And then there's the magic. When a rider bonds with a dragon, they get what's called a signet power, like a unique magic ability. Violet gets lightning-based magic from Tarn, which is super cool, but also super dangerous, right? If she can't control it, I mean.
Exactly. And guess who helps her train? Xaden Riorson? Her enemy, and also the most skilled dragon rider at the college.
So that's where the sparks start flying, huh? They train together, they push each other, and then boom, this slow burn romance starts to develop.
Here's not a simple love story, There's so much tension, attraction, and resentment all mixed up. Plus you've got Dain. He's totally jealous of Xaden getting close to Violet.
So we've got this love triangle going on, and it's all happening in a world that's about to explode in war. It's like betrayal could be around every corner. It's intense.
Totally. And just when Violet thinks she's starting to get a handle on things, bam, she uncovers this huge conspiracy. The government, they've been hiding the truth about the real enemy, these beings called the Vinin. They're sorcerers who feed on magic, and they're way more dangerous than anyone realizes.
Wow. So that throws Violet's whole world upside down. She can't trust anyone, even the people she thought were on her side. And then, just when the cadets start to feel confident, they're thrown into a real battle against these Venedimans.
Yeah, talk about trial by fire. But this is where Violet shines, She fights alongside Xaden. Their bond gets deeper as they face this scary enemy. She proves she's not just a bookworm, she's a warrior.
Okay, so what do we have so far? We've got this high-stakes world on the edge of war, a heroine who defies expectations, and a love triangle that's going to keep you guessing.
It's like the war it shapes everything, Especially relationships. It makes you think, can you really trust anyone when there's danger everywhere? Violet's always got to be wondering who's really on her side.
Yeah, for sure. It's got to be so stressful. And that pressure, it totally spills over into her relationships, right?
Hmm.
Like with Agent, it's electric, but there's so much suspicion and anger there too. It's like they have all this history, all this baggage they need to sort out before they can actually trust each other.
It's like they're walking on a tightrope, you know? One wrong step and it all falls apart. And then you've got Dain, right? He's her childhood friend, and he's trying to protect her from this crazy world, but he's almost too protective. It's like he's smothering her.
Yeah, he wants to keep her safe, but it's not what she needs. She has to experience things for herself, make her own mistakes, figure out who she is in all this chaos.
Exactly. Like, you don't get strong by hiding, right? You get strong by facing your fears. Violet, she needs to go through it all, the heartbreak, the fear, to become the powerful woman she's meant to be.
That's so true. And speaking of strong women, we got to talk about Violet's journey. You said she wasn't physically strong, but she's got this incredible mental and emotional strength. Everyone underestimates her, and she just keeps proving them wrong.
It would have been so easy for her to, give up, let everyone's negativity get to her, but she doesn't. She chooses to fight, to define herself.
It's so inspiring. It's like she's saying, I may not be what you expect, but I'm going to make you see me.
And she does. She uses her smarts, her strategy to overcome these huge challenges. It's like a classic underdog story, but with dragons and magic.
Right. Okay. But let's not forget about the dragons. They're not just they're for show, they're characters too. And the bond between a writer and their dragon, it's so special. It's deep, almost spiritual.
Yeah, it's a whole other love story, basically, full of trust and loyalty and understanding. I mean, think about it. Violet has two dragons. Each one represents a different kind of power. You've got Tarn, he's like raw strength and fear, It's the source of her lightning magic, which can be destructive, but it can also be life-giving.
And then there's Andorna, the golden dragon, who's all about hope and light. She's more playful, intuitive, like a guardian angel almost. So it's like having the best of both worlds, right?
Oh,
the fierce protector and the wise guide.
it's a pretty cool dynamic, and that brings us to the question of, what does this dual bond mean for Navarre? I mean, we know the government's corrupt, they're hiding the truth about the Ven, and the war is far from over.
Oh, yeah. So Violet, with all this power, she could expose the government, rally the people, lead the fight against the Ven Hate, but she could also be used, become a pawn in their game.
It's a scary thought. It shows you how much responsibility comes with her power. It's not just about fighting, it's about politics, making choices that could have huge consequences.
Yeah, it's a lot to handle. And she's doing all this while trying to figure out her feelings for Xaden and Dain. It's got to be a wild ride.
Totally. Fourth Wing never slows down. But before we move on, I want to touch on something we haven't talked about directly. The whole Dungeons and Dragons thing. I know you're new to the genre, so you might be wondering how it all fits in.
Yeah, I get that. When people hear Dungeons and Dragons, they might think of complicated rules or people in costumes or something.
Right. But Fourth Wing, it captures what's cool about the genre in a way that anyone can enjoy. You've got the big battles, the magical creatures, the adventure, but it's also more than that. It's about the characters, their relationships.
I see. So it's like a classic Dungeons and Dragons story, but with a modern twist. Fantasy, but focused on what it means to be human.
Exactly. And that's why so many people love it. It takes the escapism and excitement of fantasy, but it grounds it in these real human emotions.
That makes sense. It's like a reminder that even in worlds with dragons and magic, it's the human connections that really matter.
Yeah, for sure. And that's something everyone can connect with. But before we wrap up this part, let's go back to Violet. She's not your typical fantasy heroine.
That's true. She's not a princess or a chosen one or anything like that. She's just an ordinary young woman, but she's got this incredible determination.
Exactly. She's flawed, she's vulnerable, but she's also so strong and resourceful, and that's what makes her so interesting,
I agree. She's relatable, inspiring, and she's a total badass. In a world that tries to put her in a box, she chooses to create her own path.
And that's a powerful message for all of us, right? No matter what we're facing, we have the power to choose our own destiny.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. We talked about the world, the romance, Violet's strength, all that.
Yeah.
But what about the genre itself? What makes this Dungeons and Dragons kind of story?
Well, think about what you might find in a typical Dungeons and Dragons game. Huge battles, magical creatures, that sense of adventure, a whole world built on magic. Fourth Wing has all of that.
Yeah, definitely. Dragons, obviously. But then you have those creepy venom sorcerers and the whole Signet power system. It's like a fantasy buffet.
It is, but Fourth Wing makes it all feel real,
Yeah.
like grounded. Yeah, there's dragons and magic, but it's really about the characters, their relationships, the choices they make.
It's not just about fighting monsters, right?
Yeah.
It's about Violet overcoming her limitations, her feelings for Aiden and Dain, the betrayals, stuff we can all relate to, even if we've never flown on a dragon.
Exactly. And that's why it's so popular, even with people who don't usually read fantasy. It takes those classic fantasy things like the chosen one, good versus evil, and makes them feel new.
And it's still exciting, you get sucked into the world, you're rooting for Violet, and then, bam, you finish the book wanting more.
Speaking of the ending, Fourth Wing really leaves you thinking. The government's lies, the venom threat, Violet's power, it all feels like it's setting up something big. But even beyond the plot, there are these, deeper ideas that stick with you.
Like what?
Well, think about Violet's journey. She starts out underestimated, but she just keeps pushing and she proves everyone wrong. She embraces her strength, faces her fears, makes her own path. That's a powerful message, for everyone, really.
It's like no matter what challenges you face, you can break free from those limits, those expectations. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from the most unexpected places.
Right. And then there's that whole idea of love and trust. In this world where everything's uncertain, can love survive betrayal? Can you ever really know who to trust when the stakes are so high? These are questions that make you think, even after you finish the book.
We've been digging through all this research, and what really jumps out is the Dragon Rider bond. It's like way more than just, hopping on a scaly beast and taking off into the sunset.
Yeah. It's really fascinating how Yarros kind of flips the whole dragon myth on its head, These dragons are intelligent, they're independent, they've got this whole hierarchy thing going on. It's like, forget those mindless, fire-breathing monsters. These are beings who are making choices. They're choosing their riders. And those choices really reveal some deep truths about the humans they end up bonding with.
Okay, so let's break this down. Let's start with the dragon mentality. What makes these creatures tick? What are we dealing with here?
Well, I think the key thing to remember is that they operate on this system of strength and dominance. They're not impressed by titles or by human posturing. They're looking for raw potential. They're looking for courage, that grit that can survive in a world where, weakness equals death. It's like they can sense those qualities in a human.
So like if a rider doesn't measure up, game over.
Yeah, pretty much. We see that right from the start with that brutal culling during the choosing ceremony. They're not messing around, these dragons. They have zero tolerance for anyone they perceive as weak or unworthy.
That's intense.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder if they're almost testing their potential riders.
Yeah.
Pushing them to the limit to see what they're really made of.
Oh, absolutely. And that brings us to the bonding process. This is where things get really interesting because it's not a one-sided agreement. It's not just a contract. It's this profound and permanent connection that actually intertwines the dragon and rider's thoughts and emotions and even their abilities.
Wait, hold on. Shared emotions and thoughts. Are we talking telepathy?
Yes. They literally experience the world in this incredible, intertwined way, but it goes even deeper than that, because the bond also influences the rider's magical abilities, their signets. It's almost as if the dragon amplifies what's already there in the rider, their strengths, their weaknesses, even their deepest desires.
So it's not just about learning to fly and breathe fire. It's about self-discovery. It's about facing your true nature, and then maybe even having those aspects magnified by your dragon.
Exactly. And you see the impact of this bond so vividly with the main characters, Violet, Xaden, and Dain. Their dragons are more than just companions. They're like mirrors reflecting these hidden truths, these innermost yearnings.
So let's start with Violet. Initially, she's seen as frail, the underdog,
Yeah.
right? But she ends up bonding with not one, but two dragons. Cairn, the ancient black dragon, and Andarna, this young, playful golden one. What's going on there?
Well, that's where Yarros' brilliance really shines through. You see Tairn with his gruff, no-nonsense personality. He forces Violet to confront her own strength. He doesn't coddle her. He throws her into these situations that demand that she rises to the occasion. There's this one scene where he actually forces her to fight a group of venin, those deadly winged creatures. She's terrified, but she digs deep and discovers this ferocity she never knew she had.
So Tairn's like the embodiment of tough love, pushing her to become the warrior she's destined to be.
Exactly. He sees past her insecurities. He recognizes her strategic mind, her quick thinking. He's the embodiment of her potential for strength and leadership. And then you have Andarna, who offers this completely different kind of guidance.
Yeah, Andarna is so gentle, nurturing,
Yeah.
almost like a symbol of Violet's softer side.
Andarna really represents Violet's emotional intelligence. her empathy, her intuition, and her ability to dreamwalk, which is granted by Andarna, allows her to connect with others on this deeper level, to understand their motivations. It's a different kind of power, but equally vital in navigating this complex world that she's thrust into.
So 2 dragons, 2 signets, 2 different facets of Violet's power, all working together to help her reach her full potential. It's like her destiny was kind of woven into her very being from the start.
Exactly. And then when it comes to Xaden, it doesn't explicitly state what his signet is.
Yep.
But we can make some educated guesses based on his personality and his bond with Sago.
Okay, let's speculate. What kind of powers would a fierce blue dragon like Skado grant her rider?
Well, Skyle is known for her speed, agility, and precision in battle. So it's possible Xaden's signet might enhance his reflexes or grant him enhanced senses. Maybe even the ability to anticipate his opponent's moves.
It would make him an even more formidable warrior, which, aligns with his reputation as Navarre's most skilled fighter.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that also feed into his guarded nature, his need to keep everyone at arm's length?
That's a really interesting point. It could be that his signet is this double-edged sword, amplifying his strengths, but also reinforcing his isolation. Maybe part of his journey is learning to use those powers to connect, to protect, rather than to push people away.
Okay, so we've got Violet balancing strength and compassion, and then Xaden finding solace in this shared vulnerability. What about Dain? His dragon tooth seems to represent a very different set of values.
Yeah, you're right. Dain and Toth are all about conformity rules, predictability. There's such a stark contrast to those risk takers. The rule breakers, like Violet and Xaden Toth, really embodies Dain's desire for safety and security. For a world where everything fits neatly into these predetermined boxes, he's drawn to the comfort of tradition, to a life where he doesn't have to face the unknown, the unpredictable. His dragon reflects this yearning for a simpler, more controlled existence.
It's interesting because, in a way, Dain's dragon seems to hold him back. He's so focused on playing by the rules that he misses out on opportunities for real growth and connection. It's almost like his yearning for security becomes his cage.
Precisely. And this is where the concept of the signets becomes really intriguing. Because remember, a rider's signet is a manifestation of their bond with their dragon. It's a physical representation of their combined power, but it's also a reflection of their innermost selves, their potential and their limitations.
Okay, so let's talk signets.
Right.
What about Xaden and Dain's powers tell us about them?
Well, Violet's signets are particularly fascinating because she has 2. From Tan, she develops lightning magic. Powerful, volatile, unpredictable, just like her own journey. It's a symbol of her raw potential, the strength she's learning to harness.
Makes sense considering Taryn's reputation as this legendary black dragon. He's all about power and dominance. But then there's Andarna, who grants Violet the ability to dreamwalk, which is this more subtle form of magic, but incredibly potent in its own way. It almost feels like a contradiction.
Not at all. It's a perfect reflection of that duality within Violet. She's a brilliant strategist, a natural leader, but she's also deeply compassionate, empathetic, and able to understand the complexities of human emotion. Dreamwalking allows her to tap into those strengths, to gather information, to connect with others on a deeper level.
So 2 dragons, 2 signets, 2 different facets of Violet's power, all working together to help her fulfill her potential.
Exactly. Now, when it comes to Xaden, we can make some educated guesses based on his personality and his bond with Zeta.
Okay, let's speculate. What kind of powers would a fierce blue dragon like Skyle grant her rider?
Well, Skyle is known for her speed, agility, and precision in battle, so it's possible Xaden's signet might enhance his reflexes or grant him enhanced senses. Maybe even the ability to anticipate his opponent's moves.
Which would make him an even more formidable warrior, which aligns with his reputation as Navarre's most skilled fighter. But wouldn't that also feed into his guarded nature, his need to keep everyone at arm's length?
That's a really interesting point. It could be that his signet is this double-edged sword, amplifying his strengths, but also reinforcing his isolation. Maybe part of his journey is learning to use those powers to connect, to protect, rather than to push people away.
Makes you wonder if the dragons choose their riders not just based on their strengths, but also based on the lessons they need to learn, the potential for growth they possess. What about Dain? What does his signet tell us about him?
Material doesn't give specifics about Dain's signet. But knowing his dragon tooth is all about order and conformity, his powers might be something that reinforces those qualities. Perhaps he has heightened discipline control over his environment, something that reflects his yearning for a predictable, structured world.
But wouldn't that also make him less adaptable, less able to cope with the unexpected, especially in a world as chaotic and dangerous as the one they live in?
Absolutely. It's almost like his signet becomes a metaphor for his limitations. He's so focused on control, on sticking to the rules, that he fails to develop the flexibility and resilience needed to truly thrive. He becomes trapped by his own desire for safety.
This is blowing my mind. The way Yarros weaves the dragons, the bonding process, the signets, and the characters' inner yearnings together, it's brilliant. It's like these magical creatures aren't just mounts or weapons. They're extensions of their riders' souls.
You put it perfectly. The dragons are these powerful metaphors for the forces that shape us, our fears, our desires, our deepest yearnings. And through their bond, the riders are forced to confront those aspects of themselves, for better or worse.
So we've talked about the dragon mentality, the bonding process, the signets. But there's another layer to this dragon-rider relationship that we haven't really explored yet. These dragons aren't just concerned with their riders, they're also deeply connected to the world around them.
That's right. They have this ancient wisdom, this deep understanding of the natural world and its delicate balance. And while they might seem indifferent to human affairs at times, their actions often have far-reaching consequences.
Like when Tern destroys those Venan nests to protect the human settlements. It's a clear example of a dragon intervening in human affairs, even though it wasn't directly related to Violet's safety.
Exactly. And it raises some interesting questions about the dragon's role in this world. Are they simply guardians of their riders? Or do they have a larger purpose, a responsibility to maintain balance and order in the face of human folly?
So if we think about the dragons as these forces of nature, these embodiments of ancient wisdom, it almost makes you wonder if the riders aren't just individuals chosen to bond with the dragon. They're chosen to play a specific role in the grand scheme of things.
Like they're pushing their riders and maybe humanity as a whole toward a destiny that's bigger than any one individual.
Which brings us back to that question we were talking about earlier. Do the dragons choose their riders based on some kind of grand plan? Are they trying to orchestrate events to guide humanity toward a specific outcome?
It's tough to say for sure. Yarros leaves a lot of room for interpretation, but there are definitely hints that the dragons are playing a longer game. Their choices, their interventions, they seem to be nudging events in a particular direction.
It makes me think about the different paths that Violet, Xaden, and Dain are all on. Violet embracing both her strength and her compassion. She seems poised to become a leader who can unite people. Bridge divides, Xaden grappling with his vulnerability. He might learn to use his power to protect, not just to destroy, but Dain clinging to control and conformity. He seems headed for a downfall. It's almost as if the dragons are testing different approaches, different ways of being in the world.
That's a fascinating way to look at it. It's like they're conducting an experiment, observing how their riders navigate the complexities of human society, the challenges of war and peace, that eternal struggle between order and chaos.
And maybe, just maybe, they're hoping that one of these riders, or maybe all of them together, will find a way to break the cycle of violence, to create a world where humans and dragons can coexist in harmony.
A world where both embrace their strengths, confront their weaknesses, and work together to face the challenges that lie ahead. It's a hopeful thought, isn't it? That even in the face of these seemingly insurmountable odds, there's always a possibility for growth, for change, for a better future.
It's amazing how much depth and symbolism Yarros has packed into this story. We've just scratched the surface of the Dragon Rider bond, the complexities of their connection, and the profound impact they have on each other and the world around them.
And I think that's the beauty of a story like Fourth Wing. It's a thrilling adventure, it's a captivating romance, but it's also this powerful exploration of human nature, of the choices we make, the destinies we forge, and the bonds that shape who we become.
It's definitely left me with a lot to ponder. What are your final thoughts for our listeners? Something to kind of keep in mind as they continue their own exploration of Fourth Wing.
I would say pay close attention to the choices the characters make, the paths they choose to follow. Think about how their dragons influence those choices, how their bonds shape their destinies. And ask yourself this: are we truly the masters of our own fate? Or are we guided by forces beyond our control, forces that might be more connected to us than we realize?
That's a question worth pondering indeed. All right. Our listener wrote in and specifically wanted us to untangle this whole web of relationships in the book, especially how Dain started off as this childhood friend and just totally went off the rails.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's not just like your run-of-the-mill love triangle either. It really gets into like all the messy stuff about trust and control, and even when you think your heart's in the right place, sometimes it can blow up in your face, especially in relationships.
Oh yeah, definitely. And we see that like right away with Dain. I mean, he's got this whole thing about needing to protect Violet all the time.
Right.
Which, okay, fine, part of it comes from their childhood, but the way he acts like she's just made of glass or something is what really sets them up to crash and burn.
It really does. And for anyone listening who hasn't read The Fourth Wing yet, the Writer Quadrant is like this super elite group of, well, dragon writers, obviously. And it's all Violet wants, but she's constantly being told she just isn't cut out for it. And Dain, instead of being like, hey, you've got this, he's actually the one feeding those doubts. Like, he can't even see past his own idea of what her limits are.
Which, if you think about it, like in a modern context, would be like, say, a friend or a partner who is always saying stuff like, oh, honey, are you sure you could handle that new job?
Yeah.
It just seems like a lot, It seems innocent enough, but over time, it just eats away at your confidence.
100%. It's totally the difference between saying, I believe in you, and be careful, you might get hurt. One builds you up and the other just holds you back.
And Dain just keeps taking it further, too. He's always steering Violet toward what he thinks is safe, like, oh, you should just become a scribe.
Yeah.
Basically a fancy record keeper.
Right.
But Violet's dream is to, fly dragons, not be stuck behind a desk pushing papers.
Totally. And that's where you get into this whole thing about control masquerading as protection.
Oh, yeah.
It's something that pops up in real life all the time, too. Think about it. A partner who's always checking your phone, always making choices supposedly for your own good, but never actually stops to ask what you want. That feeling of being suffocated, not trusted to make your own decisions, that can totally wreck a relationship.
Yeah. And then you've got the whole memory stealing thing, which is just, I don't know, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Dain actually uses his ability to just yank information straight out of Violet's mind without her even knowing.
Yeah.
Talk about a major boundary violation.
It's a huge turning point because it shows you this fundamental difference between what they value. For Dain, the kingdom's safety trumps Violet's right to her own thoughts, her own trust.
Right.
And for Violet, it's like this deep cut that forces her to see their whole relationship for what it is.
Yeah, in today's world, imagine finding out your best friend's been secretly recording all your conversations or reading your diary without asking. I mean, come on. That would shatter even the strongest friendship.
It goes so much deeper than just hurt feelings. It's like this complete erosion of trust. And for Violet, especially after always feeling underestimated by Dain, it's this wake-up call. Like, she finally sees him for who he really is.
So yeah, she's heartbroken and definitely angry. But it also seems like that betrayal is what pushes her to grow. It's like she sees Dain for who he is and she's like, all right, time to start relying on myself.
Yeah, it totally is. It's this horrible realization, for sure, but it lights a fire under her. She stops looking to Dain for approval and starts trusting her own gut more.
And that's where Xaden comes in. He's a totally different character with his own issues and secrets. But how he treats Violet is night and day compared to Dain.
Yeah. It's important to remember, as Xaden's introduced as this traitor's son, right? So automatically there's this cloud of suspicion hanging over him. But unlike Dain, who's always putting Violet down, Xaden sees her potential right away.
He pushes her, challenges her, and treats her like an equal. In a way Dain just never did. It's almost like he's saying, I see how strong you are, even if you don't see it yourself yet.
Yeah, and that kind of validation, knowing someone sees your worth, it's huge, especially after all the crap Violet went through with the Dain. It sets the stage for a relationship built on respect and trust, something that was totally missing with Dain. And that's really the big turning point for Violet. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to get over Dain and find someone new. It's this realization that she deserves better. She deserves respect. She deserves to have a voice to make her own choices.
It's like Dain's actions, even though they were so messed up, kind of pushed her onto this path of figuring out who she really is.
Right.
She stops looking for his approval and starts like blazing her own trail, literally and figuratively.
That's such a good point. And it all ties back to this bigger theme the book explores, all those pressures society puts on you. Violet's always being told she's not strong enough, not tough enough to be a writer. Even her own mother's pushing her toward the quote-unquote safer option of becoming a scribe. But Violet's just not having it.
It totally speaks to anyone who's ever been told they're not enough, that they should just settle for less.
Exactly. And her relationship with Xaden just underlines that whole rebellious streak. He sees her potential, not her weaknesses, and he actually encourages her to embrace her strength, to be herself,
It's like that classic line, I'm not here to save you, I'm here to stand beside you. Way more empowering than the whole damsel in distress thing.
So much better. And it's not just about romance either. Violet's choice reflects this bigger idea of agency, of deciding your own destiny, especially in this world where women are expected to just, follow the rules.
Yeah, it's like she's breaking free from tradition, forging her own path. pretty badass, especially in the world that wants to keep women down.
Totally. And that whole strong female character thing, it's not just about swinging a sword or flying a dragon. It's about choosing to define yourself, to make decisions based on your values, even if it goes against what everyone expects.
And that brings us back to Xaden. He's not just the love interest. He's the key that unlocks this transformation for Violet. He sees her for who she is and wants her to be that person, flaws and all.
It's a cool dynamic because even though Xaden has his own baggage, his own secrets, he never tries to control Violet.
Yeah.
He challenges her, yeah, but he respects her judgment. He trusts her to make her own choices, even if they're different from what he would do.
And that trust, that was completely missing with Dain. Dain always thought he knew best. But Xaden gets that Violet's capable of making her own decisions, even if she makes mistakes along the way.
And that is so important for any healthy relationship, romantic or not. It's about respecting each other's independence, understanding that the other person can make their own choices and learn from them.
It's not about protecting someone from the world. It's about being there with them as they figure it out. Offering support, but letting them make their own mistakes and grow from them.
Exactly. And it's in those moments of vulnerability, their shared struggles, that Violet and Xaden's bond really becomes something special. They've both got this past trauma. They're both fighting for something bigger than themselves. And they see each other's strength, and it helps them both.
It's like they're two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
Different, but connected by a shared purpose. That's a powerful foundation for any relationship, romantic or otherwise.
Absolutely. It's about finding someone who gets you, who pushes you to be better, who sees the best in you even when you don't see it in yourself. And that's what Xaden's for Violet. He's not just a boyfriend. He's like this mirror showing her the strength she's always had but never fully realized.
It's crazy how Violet's whole messed up situation with Dain actually affects how she interacts with Xaden.
Right.
She's so sensitive to any kind of control, to anyone trying to limit her freedom. At first, she's totally resistant to Xaden. She questions his motives, pushes back against him.
It's like her defenses are up. She's not going to fall for the same trap twice, which I get it. She learned a tough lesson, and she's not about to let go of her independence now.
But Xaden, he doesn't shy away from that. He doesn't try to force her trust. He earns it, which is huge, right? Dain would just steamroll right over her, insisting he knows best.
Totally. But Xaden respects her space. He lets her come to him when she's ready, and that's what gets to Violet. She's been craving that kind of respect, that recognition of her own agency.
It lets her slowly let her guard down and see the real Xaden, which, let's be honest, he's complicated. He's got secrets. He's carrying a lot of baggage. He's not exactly an open book.
Yeah, and that makes those moments when he does open up even more powerful. When he finally lets Violet in, shares his real reasons for doing things, it shows how much he trusts her. That trust was built on facing danger together, on respecting each other.
It's like that scene where he tells her the truth about the Vinin, about how the kingdom's been lying to everyone. Huge risk. But he does it because he believes in Violet. He believes in their connection. That's a turning point for both of them.
It really is. It perfectly shows how being vulnerable can actually be a strength. Letting someone see the real you can actually bring you closer. And that's something that Dain, with his need for control, could never understand.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about how Dain messed things up with Violet, especially with that whole memory stealing thing, and how that opened the door for her and Xaden to connect. But there's this whole other piece we haven't really touched on yet. I mean, it's not just two guys fighting over a girl, right? This is about Violet trying to figure out who she is in a world that's constantly telling her what she's supposed to be.
That's what makes this book so fascinating. Rebecca Yarros is brilliant at weaving those societal pressures right into the world she created. You've got Navarre with its strict hierarchy, the expectation that women should just be wives and mothers, this constant focus on duty and obedience. It's a system that basically rewards you for following the rules and punishes you for stepping out of line.
And Violet, she's just not built for that kind of life. Everyone's telling her she's too small, too weak, too sensitive to be a writer. Even her own mother wants her to take the safe route and become a scribe. But Violet's not about to let anyone tell her what she can and can't do.
Right. And her journey, the way she fights to break free from all those expectations, it's something anyone can relate to. Anyone who's ever been told they're not good enough, that they should just settle for less.
Yeah, it's like she represents this whole idea of rebellion.
Yeah.
You know, like you can create your own destiny even if everyone tells you it's impossible. And her relationship with Xaden, it becomes this symbol of that rebellion.
For sure. And Xaden, even though he's a product of that same system, he sees how messed up it is. He recognizes the potential in people who are considered unworthy, and encourages them to prove everyone wrong.
It's like he's breaking the cycle. He doesn't have those same prejudices as the people in power. He sees Violet for who she really is, not just her family name or her physical strength. And that's exactly what she needed after years of being underestimated.
Their connection becomes this force, this challenge to the foundation of their society. It's about choosing love and freedom and individuality over duty and conformity and what everyone expects of you.
So when we talk about how Dain messed up his friendship with Violet, it's not just personal. It reflects these bigger societal forces that were already holding her back. He was part of that system. And his actions, even if he thought he was doing the right thing, just showed how broken it was.
And Violet choosing to walk away from him, choosing Xaden instead, it's this huge statement about the kind of world she wants. A world where people are judged on their character, on what they can do, not on their family or some outdated traditions.
That's a message that goes way beyond the fourth wing. It's like this call to action for everyone to question those limiting beliefs, break free from those expectations, and create a world where everyone has the chance to reach their full potential.
I think that's a perfect way to wrap things up. It's been so interesting diving deep into the fourth wing with you today. We've explored trust, betrayal, societal pressures, and ultimately the power of choosing your own path. All right, let's dive in, shall we? Fantasy. I'm betting for some of you out there, the word alone maybe brings up, I don't know, these images of like ridiculously detailed maps or like histories that you need a whole separate dictionary just to understand, maybe a dragon or two thrown in there, that kind of stuff that maybe feels a little childish sometimes. And if that's you, if you usually kind of just avoid anything with magic and mythical creatures and all that, we're going deep on Rebecca Yarros' Fourth Wing, our mission to figure out why this book has absolutely blown up, especially with readers who, wouldn't normally even touch fantasy with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah, I've heard some buzz about this one. It's breaking some boundaries, that's for sure.
Big time. We're going to look at the protagonist's journey, how she kind of carves her own path, the whole found family thing that's going on, and really try to pinpoint what it is about Yarros' writing that just pulls you in, even if you're like, fantasy, no thank you.
Give me the Skeptics rundown. I'm ready.
All right. So we've got some really sharp analyses of the book's themes and even an article that specifically breaks down why it appeals to, people like you, the non-fantasy reader. The goal is to give everyone listening a totally fresh take on Fourth Wing and maybe even the genre as a whole.
Love it. Where do we start? What makes this book different for someone who's, a little hesitant about dragons and whatnot?
Well, one thing that jumps out right away is that Yarros doesn't seem to fall into those typical fantasy traps, like the ones we talked about. Confusing lore, world building that just goes on and on. Our sources really emphasize how she blends genres, and I think that's a huge part of why it works.
Well, that's interesting. So it's not just straight up fantasy.
Right. We're not just in Dragonland here. There's a ton of action, a romance that really drives the plot. And you feel this constant tension that's almost like a thriller at times. If you're someone who loves stories with characters you actually care about, high stakes, and relationships that feel real, you'll find all of that in Fourth Wing.
So you don't need to be a fantasy aficionado to jump in.
Not at all. And that point about Yarros' background in contemporary romance really shines through, the way she creates connections between characters. Forget about it. These aren't just surface-level crushes. The chemistry is intense, the dialogue is snappy and fun, and you actually get invested in their relationships. It's like woven into the story, not just an afterthought.
I can already see why this might appeal to a wider audience.
Yeah.
Are those comparisons to the Hunger Games and Game of Thrones we see everywhere actually accurate?
Some sources even mention Divergent, but for adults. And yeah, I think those are helpful because they give you a sense of what to expect. So yeah, there are dragons in a war college, but it's not like your typical dense medieval fantasy,
Right. A little more modern, a little more relatable. So the comparisons give you a point of reference. It's like, okay, I kind of get where this is going. And the setting itself, Basgiath War College, that seems pretty intense from what I've heard. Brutal even. Do you think that kind of high-stakes environment is part of what draws in those less fantasy-inclined readers?
Oh, absolutely. And takes all those fantastical elements and throws them into this world where, people are literally dying left and right. The survival rate is shockingly low. That automatically creates a sense of urgency that's hard to ignore.
It raises the stakes for sure.
And the sources really point out how Yarros just throws you right into the action. There's no messing around, no long introductions. You're in it from page one.
I like that. Gets you hooked right away.
It's super fast-paced, almost addictive. But here's the thing. The world building, while it totally sucks you in, it never feels overwhelming. You get what you need to understand the story and the stakes, but there's no like 10-page info dump on dragon anatomy or the history of magic. It's that sweet spot, you know?
I do. I do. Immersive, but not intimidating.
Yeah.
And in this crazy, intense world, we have our protagonist, Violet Sorrengail. And she's not your typical fantasy hero, is she? Why do you think that approach to the main character, someone who's not instantly powerful or destined for greatness, works so well, especially for new fantasy readers?
It's instant relatability.
Right.
She's not born into this world of power and dragons. She's forced into it. She was supposed to have this quiet life, surrounded by books, not battling, fire-breathing beasts.
Oh, so there's this whole theme of being pushed into a path that's not yours.
Exactly. And I think that's something that resonates with a lot of people, even if they've never thought about writing a dragon. It makes you wonder, how is she going to survive? Like, she's not exactly cut out for this.
Yeah, that's a great point. You're rooting for the underdog from the get-go. So how does Violet take control of her own destiny? How does she push back against all these expectations and kind of forge her own path?
Well, despite all the doubts, both her own and those of everyone around her, she fights for her agency. She's smart, she's strategic, and she's resilient. Those are her strengths, not brute force.
It's not the typical fantasy hero mold.
Nope. And I think that's what makes her so appealing to a wider audience. Not everyone can relate to being a warrior, but we've all had to outsmart a situation or use our brains to get through a tough time.
Absolutely. We've all been there.
And her relationship with Dain, it's super interesting in this context. He wants to protect her, and maybe that comes from a good place, but it ends up holding her back. It's a form of control, you know?
He's limiting her growth without realizing it.
Yeah. And when that trust is broken, it's a huge turning point for Violet. She really starts to own her own choices and her own power. It's that desire to be recognized for who you are, not for what people expect you to be. And that's something everyone can connect with.
It's about breaking free from those expectations. And that ties into this whole idea of redefining strength, right? The book doesn't say physical power is the only way to be strong. Violet's vulnerability, at least in the beginning, actually becomes a source of strength. She adapts, she learns, she doesn't give up, and that's powerful.
It's a different kind of strength, like an inner strength.
And then you have someone like Xaden, who at first seems to represent that more traditional idea of strength, like physical power. But he learns to appreciate Violet's intelligence, her ability to think strategically. He sees that true strength is a combination of things.
It's not one size fits all. And you see Violet transform from this, seemingly weak girl into a force to be reckoned with. Not because she magically becomes super strong, but because she learns to use her strengths and finds people who believe in her.
She finds her people. Which brings us to another huge theme. Found family.
Yes, this is such a big part of the book. So Violet's been betrayed. She's in this incredibly dangerous world, and the bonds she forms with people she never expected become so important.
Those chosen connections.
Exactly. Xaden, he believes in her even when no one else does, and that's crucial for her. And then the relationships she builds within her flight, they're based on shared experiences, respect, loyalty. That stuff becomes everything when your life is constantly on the line.
Family isn't always who you're born with. It's who chooses you, who stands by you.
Right. And even the dragons, they become part of this found family. The bond between a writer and their dragon, especially Violet and Taryn, and then later on Darna, it goes way beyond just a partnership.
It's deep, almost like a parent-child or sibling kind of bond.
And it all comes down to trust. So much of this book is about finding your people, your tribe in the most unexpected places, and that those bonds, they give you strength.
Powerful stuff. So for our skeptical listeners out there, we've got an accessible world, engaging characters, these themes of self-discovery and found family that we can all relate to. But let's talk about the writing itself. What is it about Rebecca Yarros' style that's pulling in readers who normally wouldn't go near fantasy?
Well, the sources talk a lot about how she blends genres so effortlessly. You get the fantasy, of course, but also that romance element, the suspense, the action. And there's this emotional depth that keeps you hooked. Plus, everyone agrees the pacing is fantastic.
Fast-paced.
Oh, yeah. You're in it from page one. And it never lets up. So if you're someone who finds traditional fantasy a bit slow or too descriptive, this is a breath of fresh air.
Keeps you on the edge of your seat.
For sure. And we've talked about the world building, how it's immersive but not overwhelming. She gives you enough to create this vivid world, but there's no unnecessary jargon or confusing details. And Violet as a character is just so relatable. She's flawed, she's determined, and you can't help but root for her. That connection is what makes the story so powerful, regardless of the dragons flying around.
It all comes back to that human element.
Absolutely. And the emotional depth is there. Yarros explores resilience, loyalty, different kinds of love, the fight to be your own person, trust. Those are themes that everyone can relate to, fantasy fan or not. So for that listener who's still hesitant, what's the big takeaway here? Why should they give Fourth Wing a chance?
Well, it's a really accessible and emotional way to experience fantasy, precisely because it doesn't get bogged down in those traditional tropes. It's about the characters, the high stakes, the relationships. And it explores those universal themes we were talking about that honestly anyone can connect with. It doesn't matter what genres you usually like.
And Violet's journey, it makes you think about your own life. Have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever had to fight for what you wanted, even when people doubted you? That's what Fourth Wing is about. It's about finding your own strength, finding your people, and that's a human story through and through.
It leaves you with a question, really. If you can get lost in a story, if you find yourself caring about the characters, if the themes of loyalty and trust hit you on a gut level, do the dragons really matter? Are they anything more than just a cool backdrop for a story about, about being human and finding your place in the world? Maybe stepping outside your comfort zone, genre-wise, is worth it. Maybe that's where the real magic is. You won't regret it.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep diving deep.